Hey guys, it's Dustin, PPC Pros. This is our part 5 of the family law case study that we're doing. Once again, if you haven't got a chance to download the PDF, feel free to do so. It'll have a little bit of extra documented tidbits for you, but I'm covering most of it in these videos, so you shouldn't be missing anything. Just easier to follow along sometimes with PDF, but let's go ahead and jump into ROI hack number 5. So when we did our AdWords audit for this client, one of the things we always check is the ad schedule. What days of the week, what hours of the day are we running ads, and are they profitable during those days and hours? Because a lot of times you have clients with limited budgets, or you have clients that aren't open 24 hours, especially when we're talking about law, unless you're doing maybe personal injury and you have somebody that can answer the phone 24 hours. So it's important to look at where your money is going, and how each day and each hour segment are performing. And so if you look at my screen over here, probably you'll see it over here. Right now I'm looking at a day of the week report in Adwords or Google Ads for this particular client. This is what we looked at. It's a slightly different date range because I didn't have the exact date range we looked at during the audit for this video, but the numbers are still the numbers. So what we found is that we're looking for a couple of different things. We're looking for, number one, days of the week where our cost per lead is really, really high, right? Or we don't get leads at all and we're still spending money, right? So it would still fall in that same category as leads being high, except you're just not getting any leads, you're spending money. So if we take a look at this this report here, I'll show you how to get to it. First thing you want to do is make sure you've got a decent date range. You don't want to use a 30-day date range. You don't want to use usually a 3-month date range is a pretty good minimum for something like this. Unless you don't have 3 months of data, you could use whatever you want. However, you want to look at it, over a statistically valid period of time. If you look at it for just a week or a couple weeks or even a month, there may not be enough data there unless you're spending, tens of thousands of dollars. But even then, I'd argue you still don't have enough data over time to really tell what the trends are for each day. So I would say use a 3-month minimum, maybe 6 months or even longer if possible. But what you want to do is click on this little reports tab up here at the top. So if you click on reports, this used to be the dimensions tab back in the old interface. You can see right here it says dimensions. And you want to go with predefined reports, and then you want to look for time, and you can choose day of the week. Now we'll look at the hour of the day in a little bit later, but let's start with day of the week. So this is where we are. So you can see, if I can just get out of this, there we go. So you can see right here from this report, one of the things we found in the case study was that, first of all, this client was not taking calls on the weekend, right? But there's ads running on the weekend. And now I understand the thought process with following up with leads. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if we look at all of these days, right, there's about $2,000, $3,000 in spend for any given day here. And we look at the number of leads, number of conversions, and you can automatically see that a lot of days, Mondays are one of the best days, and I can argue why. It's because people research over the weekend sometimes, so they don't call till Monday. That's a very, very common thing because people are working during the week. However, if we look here at the other days, they're a lot more similar, 12, 17, 15, 12, 12 conversions. Then you got this day, 3.5 conversions, and that's on Saturday. So if you look at that, you're automatically thinking, well, I'm not getting that many leads on that day, and you can tell the spend's not much different. So if we look right over here at the cost per conversion, you can tell, first of all, these costs per conversions are very high. We already went over that kind of in the beginning of this case study, what their issue was. $150 to $200 cost per lead on average is pretty, well, closer to 200 is pretty high. And you've got this one day, Saturday, where it's over $600 cost per lead, right? You take that and you look at the fact that, they're not even open on Saturday, right? So to us, this stood out. And what we did is, we talked to the client about it, and we pretty much got rid of Saturdays and Sundays mostly. Now, only because they weren't answering the phone. So, that's something that we'll discuss with them about bringing that back on, because they want more volume now. But the point of it is if you notice like the numbers are not that far off, like let's just say, for example, you're at 165, 168 here, and you've got a day that's at like 200. You could also add a bid adjustment, a down bid adjustment, which basically tells Google Ads that when an ad runs in this day, let's say you have a negative 30% bid adjustment, it means that you're only willing to pay 30% of what your bid is on that day because it doesn't perform well. And a lot of times you can bring a bad day in line with the average cost per lead for those days just by doing that. In this case, we were off by a factor of 3, and we were tasked with getting the cost per lead down pretty quickly and then working on volume, which is where we are today. So we got rid of Saturday altogether. They weren't going to lose that many leads, right? So this is one area. Now, similar to this, you want to look at the hours of the day. So I'm going to switch the report. It's the same place we just went. So reports, predefined reports, time, and then you go to hour of the day if I can scroll correctly. Okay, hour of the day. Now there's a lot more rows here, but what we found when we did the audit for this client is that if we look once again, if we just look at the cost per conversion column, right, these are in order of the hour of the day, right, 0 being midnight, 1, 2, right, so these are the middle of the morning or the late morning, early morning, late evening hours. You can see right here that cost per conversion, we spent $800 on the midnight hour for this time period and got 0 conversions at all. So that would be a bad one, right? And you see we got $700 at 1 o'clock in the morning, 600 here, 500, 600, 400, right? And then you've got, once we get down to around 7 o'clock in the morning, now we've got a good, a fair number of leads compared to where we were here, which is onesie-twosies, right, at a really high cost. And the cost per lead is much more in line with the average, which is, around $200 or less. So not much less, but around there. You've got some hours in here, like this one's 400, right? This one is, well, if I can see here, we got some that are like really good, 43, 90, 76, those are really good. Then you got 200s, 400s, that sort of thing. So the idea is the same thing with the days of the week. Look at the hours of the day and make adjustments. You can use bid adjustments or you can remove them altogether. So once again, this client wasn't answering the phone 24 hours a day. And what we were able to do for them was just to cut out most of the, 0 to 6 o'clock in the morning hours and save them a ton of money and lose them very little leads in that process. So yeah, did they lose leads? Yeah, a handful over the course of, we're looking at 3 or 4 months here, but they're not really that valuable when you're spending thousands of dollars for a handful of leads, right? I mean, it's just not, in their mind, it wasn't worth it. The other thing to note here is a lot of people go kind of crazy with this, and like, for example, this 12 o'clock hour, with the $400 cost per lead, with only 2 leads, they'll get rid of that hour, right? So there's like this weird kind of like on and off in the middle of the day thing. I think you should be careful with that. If it was like a set of hours, like, chiropractic offices are closed certain hours and they open again later in the evening for people who get off of work. We're not talking about chiropractors, but if there was a reason like that where you might do it, that would make sense. But really, sometimes it's just a fluke in the data, right? You just have a bad couple hours throughout the day, but on average, they do convert pretty well, and you'll miss out on volume. So in this case, I mean, even here, we got 1 or 2 higher cost per leads for these couple. But, all it takes is a couple leads to change that. So I would probably be a little bit more careful with, like if it's like an hour, like this noon in the middle of the day, getting rid of that. Can you downbid it? Sure. But I still think it's probably better to just be careful and just, if you can afford to, just leave them on, maybe downbid them a little bit and just, make sure you still get that traffic because it may turn around in just a matter of, weeks or months, just depending on what's going on. So there's another thing to keep in mind about this. So there's really 2 considerations. I mentioned it before. This client was not open 24 hours, and we were tasked with initially getting the cost per lead below $100 pretty quickly, which we were able to do, and we've already shown that. The other thing to keep in mind is contact rate, right? So you've got people who are calling and people who are filling out a web form. If you're not open 24 hours or you're not able to get back to people quickly, especially if you're on a limited budget, if your budget for Google Ads is less than what you could spend, or you're kind of like new or you're struggling with it, then think about running ads during your business hours so your contact rate increases. So if it takes you, for example, if you're getting leads at midnight, but you're not able to follow up with them until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, the contact rate for those people is typically a lot lower than if they responded, if they sent you a web form or they called you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and somebody answered the phone, right? That's, for a phone call, it's 100%. For a web form, maybe you respond to it in 15 minutes and you get them on the phone really, really quickly, right? at midnight, who knows if they're going to answer the phone at 8 o'clock. Then you're calling them, at 8 o'clock in the morning. They don't answer, leaving them a message, and you're calling them again at noon. And you're chasing them down. So it's better if you're limited by budget and you're more concerned about the lead cost for right now, to probably consider running ads only when you're available to respond to leads quickly. And that's going to help, your conversion rate, not just in the sense of, appointment rate, but you'll be able to talk to people. So that lead turns into a appointment or a consultation more often because you're able to actually reach that person. So consider that too. I mean, just basic common sense, but a lot of people just want to get all the leads they can. They don't think about the fact that not all leads are equal, right? If you can't reach them, then they're not equal. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Basically, what I would recommend doing for your account is just go through these 2 reports. There's a bunch of other reports that could be helpful, but these are the 2 for this ROI hack number 5. Look for the days of the week that you're not running, or you're not answering the phone, or that are really high cost for leads. Bid them down, get rid of them, whatever makes sense for your budget, and then do the same for the hours of the day. And I guarantee you'll see your cost per lead go down. Your contact rate, I wouldn't say quality of lead. It could still be quality leads at midnight, but you may not ever talk to them. And just factor that in, that, you're going to probably get a lot better results from your leads when you're able to speak to them, because you're not getting them at odd hours of the night when you can't follow up. So hopefully this hack will help you. It was actually a really big, it seems small and seems very common sense and common, but this moved the needle for them quite a bit. I think we saved them about 10 or 15% of their ad budget. If I remember correctly, I did the math before, just by making these switches. It might have been a little bit more, but somewhere between 10 and 20% of the ad budget we were able to cut away. And I think the percentage of leads that we were losing was like 7%. So we ended up losing 7% of the leads for saving about 20% of the budget. I think that's a pretty fair trade, especially because, their goal was getting the cost per lead lower. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this hack. Once again, Dustin Miller with PPC Pros. If you have any questions, comment below, and thanks for watching.